Randy, if Randy could give some comments based on things he heard or thoughts, and we can make this part of our learning and our, because I think at some point we're all going to be together. We just got to work on things. Randy, are you ready? Are you can
Yeah, well, I thank Virginia for her presentation. I'm always happy to answer questions when I can. What I've heard mostly in the presentation is that you get pieces and parts from other people rather than the actual parity material itself that have been twisted, angled, chiseled, perverted, modified in ways that someone not familiar with it is unaware of, that twists the whole thing into a pretzel, which is exactly the political plan that was used to scrub the whole system in just after World War II. That's how the whole parity program was taken down essentially and dismantled. Some of the slides you presented here, let me see. There were several I got here. The one where you cited the Shepherd publication from the Ag Economic Journal in 1946. That quote, if you look at your own slide, you've identified the reference is to net farm income and how it's unusable for a valid measurement. And in all of the parity literature, go through Unforgiven, if you've got the copy there. And Chuck Walters has quite a lot to write about the substitution of the idea of net farm income for gross farm income, and how that was used to steer the arguments against parity. Because the analysis that was done in the 30s and was carried on, well, I can refer you to The Nature of Wealth, which is another book that I think you would benefit from reading if you have the interest. They all speak about, in regards to parity with agriculture, they all speak in regard to gross farm income. I look at it this way: gross farm income is the community's responsibility with just money and just wages to the producer of the agricultural wealth as parity. Net farm income is the farmer's responsibility. The bills a farmer pays has to come from his gross. If he's a poor farmer, if he's not sharp, if he's ruining his soil, his costs will be greater than the farmer who's paying attention to his operation. So that's up to the farmer. And yes, I'm with you. I don't want to see farmers who are producing crap be successful, but that's not a decision I get to make. Maybe you presume that you should be the one to make that decision. I will not stick myself into that position. That's up to them. I'm happy to let them do their work and discover the truths of their practices for themselves. So the material all speaks about gross farm income and national income simply as the measure of the physical economic well-being of the nation. That's all it is. There's nothing magical about it. It was just an identified relationship in the data. I suppose I could share my screen and show you one of the charts from The Nature of Wealth. Let me see here. This one here. This is a chart that shows up in a book called The Nature of Wealth. It's online. Anyone can read it. It was produced in paperback. It was originally published in 1994 by Fred Lundgren and Jerome Friemel. This graph comes from chapter 10 as it sits on the website. The website, by the way, I'll state this. It's www, well, no, it's not even that, I guess. It's economy101.net. And it's listed there as all the chapters. This comes from chapter 10, like I said. What this one purports to be in the text in the book says this is the raw materials driver effect demonstrated. This is a graph that combines the raw material income of the economy, the gross raw material income, plus whatever debt expansion was added during any given year compared with national income. The upper line is the earned or national income, and the lower dashed line is the gross raw materials income plus debt expansion. Now, the reason why those two numbers, the gross raw materials income and the debt expansion, were combined in order to show this is explained in the text of that chapter. But like I say, this is what they titled this graph. This is not me. This is Fred Lundgren wrote the text, and Jerome Friemel did the graphing and the tabular numbers. The raw material driver effect demonstrated. So that's just one example of, let me see, how do I?
Well, if I may just say really quickly, I'm not questioning the data. What my issue is the difference between correlation and causation, and the lack of testing of whether two pieces of data are correlated, or whether there is actually a cause.
Have what I said here, is that not acceptable by you? The raw material driver effect demonstrated, do you have a problem with that?
Well, you know, if something happens before something else, it does not necessarily mean that what happened a few months before causes what follows. We have an incredibly dynamic system, which is our economy, and also the farming system is incredibly dynamic and has literally thousands of factors, probably at least a couple dozen of which are really important in terms of farm size, farm technique, technology, location, weather, what else is going on. And what I'm saying is, so far, and what I'm hearing is an appeal to authority. Well, these people who came up with these ideas are authorities, therefore we should believe them. These people who came up with these ideas, this data is used for many other things, therefore it must be good, valid data that we can use as the foundation. And I'm saying that appeal to authority is a fallacy. And it's a fallacy to look at correlations and say, these are represent causation. That might be a good working hypothesis that there is a causation here, but then there would have to be a lot of additional research to establish causation.
Okay.
Sounds like a no to me.
Joe Polito has a question. Go ahead, Joe. Joe?
I kind of marvel at how all these presenters on Parity can juggle so much data and such history and the timelines and everything. It's just remarkable. And I sure share, the need to ensure that industry is sustained and well compensated. And I support Virginia's concern about the quality of what's produced. A question for Randy. 200 years ago, 80% of the population, 90% of the population was working on the farm.
Right.
And of course, productivity and machinery and so forth have made a big contribution and have freed up people to do other things, and production keeps going up and so forth. Given the fact that we've become so much productive in so many areas, does this ratio shrink in this theory? Because it would seem that the ratio should shrink because the productivity has freed us up to produce lots of other things. Thank you.
The ratio between gross farm income and national income, you mean?
Yeah, like instead of being 1 in 7, maybe 1 in 8, 1 in 9, that kind of thing. Because they're producing so much more.
Well, that means that's increasing the leverage is what it does.
Right, Randy, you might explain, in 1790, there was,
9 farmers and 1 non-farmer.
right, and then somewhere in 18, it was, 8 farmers and 2
Non-farmers.
two non-farmers. And
Right.
right, and so that's where we're going, Joe Polito. It's and that ratio may be, instead of 1 to 7, it may be 1 to 9 or 1 to 10. So if you have 1 farmer, you can have 10 people off the farm. Does that sound good, Joe? Or is that understandable?
Yeah, no, yeah, that simplifies it greatly. It just,
Yeah.
we're producing so many more things because farming has become so much more productive, partially because of the ingenuity of farming, partially because of equipment and research, everything else. But that's been the history of civilization, freeing up people to produce more and more. The standard of living's gone up, right?
Well, and the end point,
we don't spend as much on food. So I'm just thinking, has the ratio changed?
well, see, you're equating the reduction in what we pay for food with the achievement of further and further efficiencies in production. I would submit to you that that's not a workable paradigm. The end result of that is all of our production for absolutely no price. We already tried that. Ask our Black brethren from the South how that worked before the Civil War.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I understand. Thank you.
As long as people are still eating, food will be the last thing we still need to do if our technology develops to such a fare thee well that everything else is covered.
Okay. Let's go on, and we may come back to that, Joe, but let's go on to Joe Bongiovanni for, I lost Joe. Oh, no, there's Joe. I'm unmuting you, Joe, if I can.
Okay. Okay, so just a couple of really quick, small observations on things. Because there's a reason why by all the people that Virginia loves and embraces the parity movement is if you were there, really there, okay, not screening it all as it came, but if you were really there to see the benefits of it, and so those benefits have just been portrayed by Randy by showing the trend, okay, and really that's the way, I'm sorry, but that's the way economics works. They study the trends and then they make the forecasts, and then they see if they work. And there's no real causation scientifically that has to be applied to it as long as the trends keep working. So that's where we're at. We want the trends to keep working with parity. That is to say that the rise in parity ensures that the domestic economy increases, in whole, not just for the farmers. But then I'm really troubled by Virginia's offer to have a better word than parity, especially at this time in our development, okay? When in case Virginia's not looking around, the issue in our economy and in our social justice is equity, okay? It is the equality issue that we're struggling with. And so parity is the word for equality, It's the word for equitable. It's the word for equal. So if we're trying to make society equal, we have a word for it, parity. And that word won't change. That will be the flag mark of this movement, parity in the economy.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Let's go on to Howard. Howard.
All right, yeah. Well, I thank you all for these presentations on parity. Tremendous job, everyone. And yeah, I thank Randy for pointing out some of the missteps there, perhaps. But I think we all agree that we want to see farmers getting a fair shake. And if we make farming, I think, profitable, which Parity could do, is that it would allow people that want to farm get back into farming, because as we lost all those farms, that didn't lose the desire for people to want to farm and grow food. I know people who do work those other jobs just so they can farm. So tremendous job, folks. Thanks.
Okay, this is Steven. If you can all hold your questions for a moment. I would, part of the presentation actually has my name on it, and I would like to take the liberty and make a few comments myself, and then I'm happy to take more questions, or maybe we can go on during the happy hour, because we can move things along and we want to get to Greg's presentation. I want to, I've listened, there's a number of comments I want to make, and one of them is to have another conference and to continue this conversation with some continuing conference, and we can check out where we are and make more presentations so that we come together and we find out what the real data is. When it comes to this data and what Joe said about trends, it reminded me of colonial Pennsylvania, in that they started in 1721. The mayor Dickinson, rather, the mayor of Pennsylvania, or of Philadelphia, said, "I'm not sure if we're going to get through the winter. We're going to lose a lot of population." In 1723, Whitehall and the labor people there decided, well, we better let Pennsylvania, the colony there, have its own money like those other colonies, just so they can move some goods around. And they started a paper money system. And early in 1723, they were allowed to have 15,000 pounds of paper money, and they printed it in small denominations. They learned a lot from the other colonies of how to do it better. And it wasn't nearly enough. And so they turned around immediately and did double, 30,000. Now they were going to have 45,000 pounds in circulation, and that helped a lot. And basically, they looked at the trend of how 15,000 was going. They kept an office. They expected it to be open for 6 months. They had budgeted it. And it was totally, every loan was made out in 3 weeks. And they closed the office, and they found out there was a huge demand. And so they issued another 30,000, and they were, they didn't know what exact causations were, but they were looking at trends to give them some direction. And by the way, 1723, all the way up to the time of the Revolution, 1776, how they learned and self-adjusted, that was the least inflationary time in colonial Pennsylvania, and it was least inflationary more than any time in the United States since that time. And that comes from Richard Lester's study out of monetary experiments. You can read it in his book, Monetary Experiments by Richard Lester. Now, what I wanted to say at this time, more about the history, comes from the Constitution. When we talk about, it's Article 1, Section 8, around the 5th clause or so, it says, Congress shall coin the money and regulate the value thereof and of foreign coins and take care of weights and measurements, etc. They put a lot in there. And what did regulate the value thereof mean to the, you could say the founding fathers, because we find out pretty quick what they're thinking about and what it meant in practical terms. And this is the story. I'm going to tell a short story about this. The whole setup at that time was historically mercantilism. It was, in the case of the colonies there, England wanting first dibs on everything. It had to go through English ships. It had to go through English paper. They wanted to use everything for their advantage because England was in competition with France for colonies, and they were playing a game of win-loss. It was a win-loss game, and it was a competitive game. What parity is about with Wilkins's idea is not a win-loss game, it's a win-win game. And how do you create a win-win game? When Mark Pesch talked about give the trade value, the extra trade money to Haiti or to another country. So if there's a trade deficit, and I'll go back to the avocado example I've used in an earlier conference. If an avocado comes from California at 75 cents and one comes from into Chicago here at for 50 cents from Mexico, the distributor who brought that in, who imported it, doesn't get the profit or the difference. That 25 cents goes into this, what Jerry said, this transactional account, and it goes to Mexico. Mexico then can spend that 25 cents sometime within a year for goods and services. When it spends that money, it keeps our price level, it keeps that money at home and keeps our price level high. And it's good for us to give Mexico. That was a beautiful way to give foreign aid. And when Mark Young asked the question once earlier in the conference, can we raise the floor? That parity, when you give Mexico the 25 cents for them to buy in the American economy, that raises their floor. It doesn't lower our floor. That's what parity is concerned about in the parity equitable trade. Now, going back to the founding fathers and regulating the value thereof, at the very first Congress in 1789, Madison had a deal where, oh my gosh, we're poor, we need money right away. And 95%, everything was assured, it had been talked about, it was going to be an automatic pass. And the pass was, we're going to have 5% across the board and have a tariff that serves everybody equally. One of the congressmen named Fitzsimmons said, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we really need to talk about what should be a proper tariff for the various products. And then they put it to a vote. And Madison, who led the group that says 5% across the board, let's get to other things. We'll get to the details later. They lost. Fitzsimmons' logic prevailed. And so regulating the value thereof, they went through every item, nails, anchors on ships, hemp, sugar, everything. And they talked about what would be the proper price and how to protect the economy. They were regulating the value of their dollar and the value of foreign currency so that so we had a chance with our early industries in this country. I think that's where the richness is of what they were thinking about in regulating the value thereof in foreign coin. It was right in their conversation at that time. There's an article from the University of Chicago, 1893 by, and I'll make sure this gets into the proceedings, where the research was done. There were no real records at that time, but they used memoirs from the congressmen, senators, and others, and it was very detailed. And here's my last point of what they did. Or my thought about them. They really wanted, they protected everybody, and they weren't going for us winning, them losing. They went for us surviving and us having a fair chance and us having a fair go and a decent way to get manufacturers to get up and started, because the US at that time had been pushed down from the colonial period earlier. And if they had understood parity like they did in the 30s, like the farmers came to, and it's an interesting point that from 1942 to 1952, inclusive 11 years, just like Benjamin Franklin and all that thinking that went on early in Pennsylvania, they were causation. I don't know what's causing it, but they looked at the trends of the need for money and they knew they had to print more. From 42, we had parity living and breathing for 11 years, and it worked very well in this country. And this was the first war where we came out of war out of it with not being an inflation. So back the founding fathers.
We had an inflation, Stephen.
Well, okay, I'll be a little quiet then. Thanks, Randy. Always Randy around to correct you. Either way.
I apologize.
No.
The truth is important to me.
No, I thought it wasn't. There was well, maybe relative. Okay.
There was no depression after the war.
Oh, yeah, maybe that was what I was thinking of, Randy. Thank you. Okay. The founding fathers, though, last point there. South Carolina, you can think of South Carolina then compared to the other states. That particular state of the 13, that was very agrarian. They were just farmers in South Carolina. They had very little industry. And a lot of the protections for starting, nail manufacturers all around Massachusetts, or anchors made, hemp from Pennsylvania, hops for beer and protecting that and having a tariff against imports. All of that gets well argued out. But if they had thought about how trade needed to take place more interstate, and they were thinking in terms of parity a little bit better, they might have protected South Carolina a little bit better from reading the stories. So I'm going to put this article out there, and my suggestion is we continue this conference in a few months, and we can come back again. And our goal in the parity group is, if we can't make Virginia one of us, we're in trouble. So we love everybody, loves everybody here, and we got it. And we're the common folk, the 99%, the 90%, and we got to make it work for ourselves. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll get that article into the proceedings, and I'll go on with questions. I still see hands up, and thank you for your patience for letting me talk. Warren, you're next.
Yeah, excuse me. As a matter of fact, I belong to the Grange. You might have heard of that, the Patrons of Husbandry.
Yep.
Yeah, yep.
What has been happening close to Grange is some shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And that's because the family farm has been shrinking. And I'm not sure that we're concerned about reinstating parity. I think though, the issue is aggregate demand to keep farm prices high enough so that the farmer could make a living doing it. That's the important thing.
Right.
I'm wondering, I'm not sure when food stamps were invented. But my understanding of the SNAP program was that was kind of a bipartisan rural urban coalition that giving food stamps to the poor who otherwise weren't eating well would buy more food that would add demand on the retail side and would keep farm prices up. I have a friend who lives has a dairy up a few miles from me. The dairy farms are probably like 2 dairies left, huge dairies in Massachusetts. When I was a kid, there were 3 or 4 dairy farms in my own town.
Right.
So this is what's been happening is economies of scale. What happens, the farmer in debt, trying to be competitive with his neighbor, if in order to get that cost down, just like any employer is trying to get his costs down. And so he'll go out and borrow money from machinery, increase his productivity. The problem was increased productivity. The farmers produce too much food. Well, too much food on the market gluts the market and the price goes down. There was no way to manage supply. Like OPEC can manage the supply, well, they can turn the spigots up and down. They manage the price of the oil price per oil because they can manage the supply side. When you had all bunch of individual farmers, they're going to go out to get the most they can. They actually drive the price of food down. And the industrial people, that's great because we got to feed the factory workers and we want cheap food. Our basic policy in this country is to drive down the price of food, make cheap food and fuel for the people to keep running. So what we have now is huge mega farms that have been driven back further out, making the farms, add farm to farm to farm. And you have big farms, family farms. And so they have these huge machines. And of course, they have to go to John Deere and they have to borrow tons of money. So this is a great thing for the banks, and the debt money system is behind it all. So the key is what we want to do is show why the debt money system is bad. And that clearly, in the agricultural industry, you can demonstrate what has happened over the last 40, 50, 60 years and why everybody's in debt up to their eyeballs. And all this is a debt-based monetary system that we've got to understand how it affects everybody. And of course, the more you farm, the way you're farming, and you destroy the, biodiversity, that's an environmental issue. It's a climate control issue. It's all a big issue, but it all comes right back to the banks, right back to all they're able to rape up all the rent from everything we do. Every dollar we have in our pocket, somebody borrowed it. It's owed by somebody to somebody. So the whole thing that we're all living off of borrowed, rented money. That we got to go back and get equity money back.
Thank you, Warren. Randy, a quick comment. We have 2 more questions, but we're cutting into Greg's time to help wrap things up. And I also invite, after Greg is finished, we go into happy hour. We can start that happy hour with questions. I see Lucille and Lee wanting to ask questions. So quick response to Warren, anybody, or Randy in particular?
Yeah, I could respond to Warren. I agree with you. We do need the sound money, the sovereign money, the community money, however you want to express it. Absolutely. It's a danger to get into whether or not overproduction of food has actually caused the low prices. If a wheat farmer in North Dakota harvests his wheat and takes it to market, there is 365 days of supply and 1 day of demand. What is it that is called an oversupply? This is part of the difficulty of calculating out how the farm economy plays into the rest of the national economy. That's what parity pricing attempts to recognize and handle. It's even Solon of Athens 2,600 years ago implemented floor prices for agricultural products as part of his reforms. And it worked.
All I know
Very
is
good. go ahead, Warren.
He has to try to keep the milk prices up. Cabot cooperatives, that's why they ended up in cooperatives as an alternative to having a
Yeah, that's
factory.
not enough.
Because they can manage supply. They can say, we're gonna cut your herd, dump the milk, and keep the supply off the market, yes, to keep the supply down, put the price up.
No,
That, I know,
That's the way
Warren.
it works.
no.
Sorry.
Okay, let's hold off on that. And those are two papers. Warren, we need it's the Farm Economics Bureau argument, and you're making it well, and please do it. Let's aim for, pick a month, March, we'll have a parity conference on this. The seal, you've been very, very patient. Please give us a word.
Oops. Okay, I'm muted. So to try to be brief, I'm going to say my question, which is for Randy, and maybe then give a little background to build up to it again. But my basic question is the data analysis that I believe Virginia expects to be done to confirm parity pricing for today, is that actually possible to do? And just to build up to that question again, so I don't know or understand parity or par economics enough, but from the little bit I do know, I think it's compatible with sort of a labor theory of value. And to the extent that that is true, par economics makes a lot of good sense to me. So I got here late for Virginia's presentation. I missed the film and Jerry's, but from prior things I've heard Virginia say, I think a big part of her point is that there aren't enough current data analyses to confirm parity pricing in agriculture today. And so my question though is, you know, given how far along we are now in the Federal Reserve money and banking system, you know, post World War II, post Bretton Woods, post, you know, the end of the so-called gold standard, you know, reigns, post the end of Glass-Steagall, you know, in the late 90s. And as Warren said, you know, with all the food stamps and SNAP programs, given how far along we are on that path, you know, and the so-called commodity markets, you know, determining prices for agriculture prices, and the subsidies then for agribusiness really, can that data analysis really be done today in the way that Virginia kind of expects, and maybe many scientists would expect it can be done? Can you answer that and help, you know, Virginia and the science, if it can't be, you know, how can we deal with that? So I'm going to be quiet and let you answer. Thank you.
Well, it's a big question. I agree with you, and I don't know. I know I can do the calculations to come up with the parity pricing because the USDA does still maintain the index numbers series based upon the 1910 to 14 base period. They are required to do that by law. That's part of the law they still follow. So given that, and the consumer price index, there's good tools there. Well, there's competent tools. I can't say they're good, but they are useful tools that can be used to calculate parity pricing today. That's not the problem. The problem is that the Secretary of Agriculture still has the authority to implement parity pricing. And I would argue, in fact, based upon the genesis of the law, that he has the obligation to regulate markets, which has never gone away. It was adopted as an emergency measure in 1933. It was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in 1936. In June of 1937, it was, as the Congress stated, affirmed, validated, and reenacted without change in 1937. And so the emergency declaration still exists, in which the government took the marketing rights of every farmer in the nation in the national public interest. And in order to provide the Fifth Amendment compensation, obligated themselves to regulate the markets to provide parity prices to farmers. Now, at the time that happened, they didn't know how to do it. That's what Carl Wilkin and the team taught Congress how to do that. And following the war, which was adopted again, the rates didn't work during the Depression because they weren't set high enough. They were set first at 75% and then at 80%. And then finally, by 1942, they moved it up to 90% of a floor price, 90% of parity. And that was what was maintained all the way to 1952. But from that point on, with the fiddling with the base period and the sliding parity, they called it, it all got turned on its head and finally just dripped away bit by bit by bit until today we have nothing at all, and still the obligation sits in the law. So all of that stuff is there. It could be done. It's just the Secretary of Agriculture refuses to exercise his authority to do so. But my guess is that in 2000, there was a lawsuit called the Four Farmers lawsuit, went into federal court and was adjudicated essentially by briefs until, although there was oral argument at the appellate level and a writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court was denied. So the ruling that stood on the Four Farmers was that we cannot decide on the question you have brought before us. You have asked a political question. You must seek your redress in the elective branches of government. And what happened after that ruling was affirmed by the refusal of the Supreme Court to hear the writ or grant the writ, was that the U.S. attorney in Denver, who was instrumental on the government side of dealing with the suit to begin with, called up one of the principals who brought the suit. This was Michael Haggerty, is the man's name, called up Russell Grider, one of the principals in the suit, one of the Four Farmers, and told him on the phone, you lost because it became necessary to mislead the judiciary in order to protect the executive.
Okay, let's take a break because we're already
I apologize.
no, it's
I get long-winded.
nope, it's great. Lee has a question too. Lee, can we hold off on your question? We're going to go, Greg, can we go to the question session, or do you want to get a quick question in right now, Lee? I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Lee.
It's real quick. I just want to make two quick comments. One is to Warren. My uncle, who farmed wheat, flax, and rye his entire life in North Dakota, said on many occasions, farmers are their own worst enemy. The second thing I want to make was to Joe Polito. He talked about the dramatically increased production of crops. And I would say that non-parity farming has allowed farmers to hit the bullseye. However, it is, I think, well established all over the world that the United States makes the crappiest food on the planet. And Virginia is witness number one, since she prefers to eat organics. And also, if you looked at Jerry's presentation, the parity prices she's talking about are for non-GMO, non-pesticide foods, which would get us back to a nutrition base from an earlier time when we were a lot healthier people. End of comment.
One quick question. If we got back the parity system, would it make it more easy for smaller farmers to get back and recover and do more organic farming?
Absolutely.
Let me answer that one really quick. The simple answer is yes. And let's go into this further. And I just wanted to respond to Lucille's question a bit more. Yeah, I would love to see, maybe there could be a parity modeling where we could maybe in Oregon or Michigan or North Dakota, wherever, we could, in the same way Richard Werner went into a bank and did a study of an actuality, maybe we go ahead and do an actual study, create a tiny little model or example. What is the real cost? And to Virginia's thinking, by all means, bring in women, bring in caring, bring in the full salary, the full line of costs for everybody. Nobody in our parity group wants to short a woman. It's not, or girls. I was hoping at least they're thinking family, like a family unit, but is it just the white male? Let's bring it all in and see what kind of modeling. So if we get the money, or maybe we use some of our own or fundraise, we can begin to do a little study, and then we can ask a foundation for a bigger study. But anyhow, let's take a break and let's find Greg Coleridge, please. And let's get to the next session, or we'll never get through. Greg, can you give us some reflections over the last 2-3 days?
Well, I can try. Thanks so much, Steve, for the invite.
And any thoughts you have for us to go into the future by? Any connections you want to make to move to amend, or other organizations for us? We're all yours. The floor is yours, Greg.
Well, again, thanks for the invite, but I'm not sure whether to thank or curse you for this task of trying to make a feeble attempt at bringing all this together. Before doing that, in light of a pretty intense conversation that we have just had collectively, I'd like to sort of use or abuse my my sense of having the floor here to just ask if we could just take maybe 30 seconds of quiet, just to kind of reflect. So however you want to do that, be in the same space, moment, close your eyes if you want to, look away on something that inspires you or calms you, but do what you need to do 30 seconds. Okay. Well, thanks to everyone who has been a part of this. I have certainly learned an awful lot and have had to cobble together with crayon on pencil and on paper a few notes, few reflections. I'm not necessarily any more qualified than any of you to try to pull something together here and make some comments that at least try to, and I'm not sure if I can form any definitive answers, but I sure as heck can raise some questions. And in sort of listening and trying to reflect on and take notes, I guess I want to begin by just saying, I guess it was Friday night when Steven was quite right at the beginning of this gathering and claiming that this was the most diverse gathering, very diverse, maybe the most diverse that has taken place among the some gatherings of the AMI, or the annual more than ever before. And I think that's probably in part due to the meeting of many speakers AMI have run into at various international conferences, but also quite honestly, thanks in part to Zoom, where people from around the world could much more come together electronically than could ever get together in Chicago. Though certainly as its positive features being in the same space physically. But of course, it has some downsides, if not. And so here we have been, it has been just a wonderful gathering. I know Stephen also said pretty early on that that he was hoping that what the conference could do would be to, quote, looking for calm ways to look at the future. Calm, C-A-L-M. And I think certainly that is an attribute, but I would just all like to add some others that I think are equally important: of prophetic, relevant, inclusive, strategic, and urgent. That we need all of those kinds of adjectives and to action, action orient to them as we look ahead and try to glean from what has gone on this weekend. And I was thrilled to hear, just whenever it was, an hour and a half ago or 2 hours ago, when people began to chat, maybe we should try to sort of get together here, that there will be a gathering of people sooner rather than later, maybe as early as next week, to begin sort of the more formal reflection of what went on here. But I do want to just take a minute. Hopefully I can get through it before I'm cut off again, to share a few reflections, but also maybe to take a little bit of time, depending on people's willingness to sort of hear from you, if you just didn't want to wait until next week, or maybe a little later. But I do have a couple of overall reflections of what I think I've heard, and then some specific sort of questions to ask. So sort of beginning with overall reflections, I certainly a common theme that I heard was sort of to the extent of that these are probably challenging times, unprecedented to a great extent, which I would agree, to the degree of the potential crises that we're facing, the interconnectedness of them all, certainly the problems associated with money, connect with the ecological crisis, with the economic crisis, with the food crisis. And so these are, times that are difficult to sort of look and compare the times in the past, to learn from, to take from lessons that can be applied to today, since they are so unbelievably unique. The financial and the monetary systems have played, of course, a devastating role in these crises. And the thinking and the acting of us as monetary reformers, as I think we are all in agreement, must be principally focused on solutions, but they must also be placed in the context of the larger sort of systems, that sort of the belief that we can just sort of, helicopter in, never mind a helicopter money, but to believe that somehow we can helicopter monetary reform and just sort of drop it down to an existing system that has some inherent unjust flaws in it, whether it's social injustices or economic or ecological or political injustices, and believe that it all by itself is going to remedy that. It's just not going to work. So we've got to understand that there are these other more systemic problems that have to be dealt with, and that monetary reform and solutions has to be dealt with in context to those other concerns. And that one of those more base concerns has to do with, as many speakers spoke about in different ways, giving different examples, that of power. Who rules, who decides, who makes the decisions affecting our lives, our communities, people, places, and the planet. People have used money today in the same way in the past that they've used, their sovereign right of birth, whether they were kings or queens or princes or princesses, or religion or education, to dominate, to control, to govern. And today, there's all sorts of ways, is there not, where that form of governance is used in a top-down fashion, not just by money, but police and the military, intelligence agencies, laws, regulations, constitutions, and all that's at the nation state level. We've heard about, and several speakers have spoken about, the global implications and the global expression of power that operates outside the arenas of the nation state through IFIs, international financial institutions, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, but also various UN agencies that have been used and misused, that the UN itself, but also those that have been set up, IMF, World Bank, GATT, and all of those misnamed trade agreements that really aren't about trade at all, be it free or fair, but about who rules, who decides, who governs, and embedded in many of those international trade deals are sort of the equivalent of what the Supreme Court is in this country. That is something that's beyond the reach of people on the ground operating with sovereignty or with democracy. And they call them international dispute settlement programs, sort of kangaroo courts that are made up of corporate attorneys that make decisions around whether a trade, something, a law that exists at a state level or nation state level, defined as trade, but basically deals with democracy, is an impediment to trade, sort of in the same way that the Supreme Court used the Commerce Clause, also in Article Section 8, but Clause 3, as opposed to Clause 5, that defines money as something that can be created by Congress. But Article 1, Section 3, or Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 is about the Commerce Clause, and that has been used and misused by the merchants and by the corporate entities, almost from day one in this country to sort of rule and preempt local decision-making. So these are, serious problems that affect our ability to govern ourselves, and certainly has impact on our ability to rule economically, to rule democratically, to make decisions governing, protecting our natural resources and the like. So a number of questions I have, and just sort of related to monetary reform going forward, are heard that has come up. Different people have talked about and looking at today, what is money? What constitutes reform? Or should be called reform or transform, democratize money, call it just money, sovereign money, democratizing money. So questions and discussion and consensus needs. It's an ongoing discussion, is it not? In the US, it may make the call somewhere else, something else. Is the ultimate reform, at least country, should account or include now all the new forms?
So, hey, it's 6:27. I think everyone should get a drink and we should have a happy hour now. And other thoughts? Oh, we have somebody coming in, and it looks like it might be an Ohio phone number. But I'm thinking we should have a toast.
Hello?
Hey, Greg, you're on. We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm having to call in since I got cut off again and for some reason could not seem to get back on. So my apologies there. Very good. Well, if I might, just 1 or 2 more minutes here to kind of share a couple of other reflections of, in terms of raising questions of dealing with money. A couple of other questions that come to mind have to do with, how do we best try to support one another in terms of monetary academicians and organizers and activists. Our friends yesterday afternoon who took time, our Spanish friends, and spoke about and asked for support from academicians. I think that's across the board. We need one another, those who are formal academicians who are doing the rigorous research. They need to popularize their material, and activists need, that credibility and the legitimacy that comes from that to go forward and reach out into the community. So we need one another, and academicians need to figure out how to take their material and get it out wider, broader and deeper to the general community. So figuring out ways where people who are more on the ground activists and people who are more academicians can support one another, I think is very important. Another is how does sovereign money relate to the other local money reforms that have been brought up, whether it's public banking, local currencies, the resource-based economy that we heard about. There's, centralized versus decentralized money creation. There's, there's all kinds of efforts out there of groups, young people now who are protesting the divestment of fossil fuels and, protesting in front of banks. So how does the monetary reform movement relate to other sort of monetary reform groups at a local level, but also these efforts that are focusing on banks, either because of their fossil fuel investments, the CRA movement, community, the CRA of people, banks that have blackballed or redlined low and moderate income communities, usually African-American communities. There's just a whole assortment of efforts out there in which people are aware of the power and the abuse of banks through their financing. And so how can the monetary reform people sort of figure out a way to connect with them? Another question is, how does the sovereign money effort at the nation state level relate to the international just money efforts? We heard Mark Young today sort of make a strong case for we really can't sort of expect to be effective at the national level in any country because of differences. And are those differences maybe be unjust or unfair? So trying to figure out that I think is very important. And there's some pluses and minuses. I mean, I don't think you can really throw your whole lot into focusing just on international to becoming too interdependent, because if you're too interdependent, then you lose any independence. So it's, I think, very important to figure out a way to still focus at a nation state level, but at the same time have one foot or part of a foot at the international level. How do we talk to and relate to, our friends who are involved in MMT? We've heard a few things, and I know there's been an ongoing conversation, and there's some pluses and minuses. I think we need to be mindful of possibilities of where we can connect, but also concerned about the potential problems associated with it being an effort to sort of co-opt the movement, and that when we maybe speak to some of the MMT, maybe what we need to do is make a distinction between MMT leaders and MMT followers, that the leaders we may never win over, but if we speak to them in a public setting, it may be worthwhile because the audience is not the leaders. The audience is maybe the followers of them who simply have not heard of sovereign money or just money, that when they do, when we're speaking to the leaders, our real audience are the followers who we may win over by giving a strong and justified case of monetary reform. To what extent should parity pricing be connected to monetary reform? We just had a discussion about that. Should there be an intentional, overt, conscious, direct connection between the need for sovereign money and these existential crises? I know, in the past, no, it should just be about reform, just stick to reform and only reform. We shouldn't connect it to anything else. And others saying, well, wait a second, maybe we need to sort of hitch our wagon, if you will, to climate change, to the economic crisis, maybe to food justice. So that's sort of an area of sort of examining consensus or trying to reach consensus. Just a couple more. How do we balance the rigor of research and the rigor of organizing? We heard from our friend Usi from Sweden talk about, and he did a tremendous job in addressing the need to focus at a person-to-person level on organizing. It's organizing in doing education at a person-to-person level in ways that people can understand that is so important. Our friends in Central America in South America a couple generations ago, whether it's through, the pedagogical approach, whether it's through liberation theology, these are all efforts at trying to integrate constituents who are on the front lines of the problems to bring their voices to the fore in doing education, advocacy, and organizing. And in this country, in the US anyway, there's been popular education in places like the Miles Horton and the Highlander Center, and other places where popular education has been done, that really places the voices of those who we want to reach as being those who are defining the problem. And so figuring out how we talk less to and listen more to people who we want to work with is an ongoing challenge. And finally, sort of, shouldn't our main strategic goal, again, a question of going forward and trying to build consensus, is to what extent should our main strategic goal be ultimately to build power, to build organization, to be part of a broad and deep democracy movement, not necessarily a monetary reform movement, which needs to be a part of, but ultimately a democracy movement is a movement where people who are trying to work on, whether it's healthcare or food justice or monetary reform or anything, without having the ultimate right to decide, self-governance, the right to have the authority to make decisions affecting our lives, our communities, and our planet, will we not be able to achieve any of the reforms that we're trying to make, changes that we want to make. And the beauty of trying to come under an umbrella of a democracy movement is that it will make all of our causes easier to attain. And it's something that all of these people working on all of these issues can, I think, get under, because it's going to help all of these. So to what extent should the monetary reform movement be part of an effort, and it's growing, of saying that we need to be part of something greater than ourselves? And I should say, this may be a good point, and I don't know, maybe Alfonso already mentioned that the Alliance for Just Money is part of an effort that is taking place next April in the US with a number of other national groups, including Move to Amend and others, that are going to be focused on the whole issue of, the theme is "The System Won't Save Us." Mobilizing Alternative Strategies is the name of this conference, that's really going to be focused on systemic change, fundamental structural change that will help all of the participants, regardless of the issue or the concern that they are working on, come together and figure out how we can work together to change the fundamental rules of the game. Because if the rules of the game are stacked against us, then trying to change public policies, trying to change laws, trying to change statutes, trying to change regulations are just not achievable. And the only last thing to say is that I thought a number of the speakers, Ola Björg and Ahmad Mira, spoke of, yes, we need changes at the external level, whether it's policies, whether it's legal, constitutional, all of that is needed. But we also need personal change. Thinking with our hearts is, as someone said, changing and focusing on our spirit and character. That unless we change our culture, unless we focus on the person, unless we are figuring out how to address at the individual level. I mean, with all these crises out there, there are a lot of people we know through the pandemic, a lot of people have just become paralyzed. The fear and despair associated with what's going on, the paralysis, not to mention the powers to be in this country, whether it's the oligarchical, the well-to-do, which they use the corporate media to reinforce, or the corporate entities in general, say that, the other thing, that the fear and despair associated with trying to come to terms with this, but also the sense, the narrative that you're too stupid, you're too unorganized, you're too unable to do anything, so leave it to us. So we've got to figure out how to address the personal, how to deal with not just sort of the making people more skilled politically and figuring out how they can become better educators or advocates or organizers, but also strengthened individually. Sally Kempton said, sort of a thinker, a meditator, it's hard to fight an enemy who has outposts in your head. And right now, the outposts in our head, the narrative that's in all of our heads, the colonizing that is in our heads are coming from the powers to be to say, you can't do it. It's impossible. The last chapter of history has already been written. It's too late. You can sort of nibble around the edges, but you can't change things fundamentally or profoundly. So we've got to get over that. And the only way to do that is, at least in part, to figure out how parts of whatever we do can spend some bit of time addressing the personal, figuring out ways to affirm that we are in this together. We're not alone. You're not alone. We can be part of some community, even if it is on Zoom. So, yep, I'll just simply end. Yeah, no question. As mentioned before, the current systems, yeah, it is unprecedented, but the unprecedentedness has something to do with the fact that what's going on today is just so profoundly unsustainable because it's so interconnected. This growth-based economy, the wealth and the corporate capturing of elected officials and of government and the ecological destruction, all of that is unsustainable. It is not going to continue. And so it offers an opportunity to bring about a different way to act and to think and to be together. So that's the charge as we go forward, to do it strategically, to do it, as Steven said at the beginning, yes, we need to do this with calmness, but we need to do it with prophecy, with relevancy, with inclusiveness, with a strategic sense of how we're going to do this to build power, to build a democracy movement, because we know the powers to be that are so powerful are working overtime now to pass laws, to try to internalize and galvanize and build up their reinforcements and sort of their shields. And so that's behind, is it not, all of these laws and rules criminalizing dissent, making voter suppression, using gerrymandering, preempting all of these decisions at a lower level by going to courts and international institutions, monopolizing and corporatizing and centralizing. All of that is sort of the last stage of a furious attempt on their part to try to lock in certain changes because they know what they are doing. The myth and lore, and that is what they have built their ability to control on, is to create this narrative in our mind that it's a certain way, and we can control your minds. And so we don't need the military to do it. We have just used the creation myth, if you will, that you're in a democracy. You can make decisions however you want, and all of that is crumbling. And so that opens up a possibility, yes, to operate calmly, but to do it in all these other ways that really help us to come together. And I think, the opportunities are endless, both as a monetary grouping and community, but even better as part of something larger than ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Greg. My cohort here, Sir Hobart, would like to get in a word, and we'll give him the floor. And I think he's ready for some COP 26 action. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll keep it sweet and short. So a little group, basically me and people getting edits back, have been developing, something of a statement to bring to the participants of the UN Climate Conference, the so-called COP 26 in Glasgow. So we came up with the following really short letter. And we ask you, if you like, because you might not totally agree with everything in here, that you can sign it, either just your name or your name and place of origin, or maybe add some titles or degrees or whatever to make it a little more, add some gravitas to it. So as far as the statement stands now, I will first read kind of the intro, then the statement itself, and then how it is finished. So it's to the participants in that climate change conference. It comes from, it's about the monetary dimension of climate change. It is from attendees, maybe not all, of the 17th Monetary Reform Conference by the American Monetary Institute. Dear participants, this is a timely and urgent message to all of you who are concerned about the causes and solutions of climate change. We are a group of concerned citizens, including academics, experts, and activists, who have delved into the current global monetary system and its problematic impact on society and the environment. We are gathered at the 17th Monetary Reform Conference organized by the American Monetary Institute, in which context we have formulated this letter. Our concise statement with ample background references is the following. We acknowledge there exists a strong correlation between the current debt-based monetary system and climate change. It acts through multiple paths of transmission, which have to be taken into account to find just and sustainable solutions. On top of that, we strongly believe that a sovereign monetary system will allow substantial public investments which are required to steer global civilization from a brown carbon-based system to a green, equitable, post-fossil fuel age with a balanced carbon cycle. That's the statement. So I close that. We invite you to get familiar with this line of analysis, and based on it, our policy proposal, which we hope you will give due attention. Signed, and then so far, Tim DiMuzio has signed, Richard Robbins has signed, Joseph Huber has signed, I have signed it, and from there we go further. As we have not set up this in a high-tech manner, Steven will put in the chat how you can reach us by email. And when we finalize this, and we will do this after this meeting is over, I will put this statement accessible on the conference page of this conference. And we will also then again put our emails there, so you can tell us if you like your name added to this statement. So I will repeat just the core of the statement, so it will get into your nice brains, which might be fried now after this, all these hours. So here it goes again. We acknowledge there exists a strong correlation between the current debt-based monetary system and climate change. It acts through multiple paths of transmission, which have to be taken into account to find just and sustainable solutions. On top of that, we strongly believe that a sovereign monetary system will allow substantial public investments which are required to steer global civilization from a brown carbon-based system to a green, equitable, post-fossil fuel age with a balanced carbon cycle. And then there are 9 footnotes woven into it to back up the statement. That's and you can read those when we put this statement out. So, Steven, I invite you to get that information into the chat. Did you get there?
I'm in the chat. I don't have anything to copy yet.
I sent it to you by
Oh, okay,
that
cool.
email that I
Okay.
sent you.
Then I
Sorry,
may
folks,
have it.
old guys trying to get organized in this in this high-tech age. I'm working with a computer. Well, the computer I'm using now is a nice Apple from Steven. My computer itself is now talking with these other computers, and so I'm kind of handicapped. So I need a thumb drive to go back and forth.
Oops. I sent it by direct mail to Leah, but I needed to send it to everybody. So here it goes again.
And so I got Virginia's name, and Virginia, I can always add a title or whatever, or a degree, or a place of origin.
Yeah, please send back the total information. And the other thing I'd like to say is, now I added it, it's there for everyone to see. If anybody, because some people, rather than think about climate change, acknowledge many environmental problems. And if anybody wants to create an alternative letter or signature about environment or some other perspective, I don't want to, I happen to be a strong believer in climate change. I don't know, I think most of you know, I've lived with Eskimos on St. Lawrence Island, and I learned to speak their language. I'll speak a little bit if you like. But during this, I was there for 8 months in 1972 on my first visit. And I can tell you there was ice all around the island, and whale would not get to the island until mid-March for when it would open up and they could get the krill and feed. Now, for them to do that, they have to come up in December and try to get past the island. And so the ice, the seasonal ice there has shrunk tremendously. And they say when they have a local problem, they're not able to fix it. They say they have to fix it internationally first, even to fix their local problems. So but on the environmental side, even without thinking about climate change, there's dioxins and other poisons from incinerators that get there. And when dioxins get to the Arctic, they cause havoc and they stay persistent in the Arctic Ocean to the point where there's doctors that say Eskimo women shouldn't be lactating there. They shouldn't be eating the local food in places because of health concerns with the dioxins that are in other POPs or organic chemicals. But the funny thing about dioxins is they have a chemical trail, and you can trace dioxins from the actual incinerator they come from. And so many of these incinerators, they come from the United States, and you can find out exactly, and they travel just about due north. So I come from a point of strong climate concern or environmental concern too. And not all people believe in climate change. So, but as an AMI policy, I would be happy to sign all letters that lead towards action on the monetary system, either towards climate change or environmental concerns or soil concerns, whatever they may be. So I'm putting that across as my official AMI attitude. So I feel the need to act on climate from my standpoint. One thing that really worries me is I've looked at some data and heard some reports about the current that moves from the Caribbean current that goes up to Europe. And there's been some measurement that current has been slowing. If that current slowed down or stopped, I would be very, very concerned. And that would be a game changer. That right now the ice situation is serious because we're losing our natural weather patterns. So anyhow, I'm going to be quiet with all that. I think everyone's got my message on that.
Yeah, thank you. Just the last little thing. I only actually gave the names of those signs, but Frans Verhagen was also involved, and Howard Switzer and Lucille Eckridge in editing, formulating, developing this statement. So thank you very much for that. You will hear more at a mid-level technological way. We could have set up a whole website where you could go to, but
we can send out the statement again. next Saturday at 11:30 Central Time, we'll have a debriefing of this for people who can attend to think about, what did we get out of this whole weekend? I'll try to get videos up. I don't know how fast they'll get up, but also I'll include that invitation that Howard has, and I'll include any other invitations that people want others to consider too. Thank you.
We have Howard Switzer again offering to do a song, but we have one hand up from our teacher and great sponsor from Canada.
Joe Polito.
Yeah, Polito, indeed. Joe,
one-
go ahead.
Yeah, we should I think we should just unmute everybody at this standpoint. It's, well, I don't know. If people want to be unmuted, just raise your hand.
I wanted to reinforce the point that Steven Walsh made about an important factor in all of this. And I think he was referring to Greg's comments when he was cut off, was the constitutional considerations. I think it was UC Ora who mentioned that this afternoon, and I think it was FDR who proposed a Bill of Economic Rights. And it seems to me if that's another avenue to getting a lot of things done, because that would provide all sorts of legal cases, whether it's education or health or jobs. All those things that FDR put in that list are in the Declaration of Human Rights. But of course, he died and he didn't get to nudge things here in the United States. That was a good suggestion, Steve.
Whatever part I did, thank you. And thank you to Greg too for his lining that up. Peshwak, I see you got a sweater on. Do you have any words? Peshwak, any thoughts? Wait, it's on mute. Okay, now if you could say something. How was this conference for you?
It was very great. I really appreciate your time and all of these great minds here. I know I'm totally coming from a different world and different mindset probably, but I share many. I see that I saw that I share many same kind of a background in terms of this solid mindset that has to be needed into this a good monetary system. And I just want to remind people here that for many years I was thinking that, okay, the US dollar is backed by what after 1971? And many people outside the US, they talk about the US Army, okay? But or petrodollar, but to my understanding, actually, it's backed by the great heart of the people of America. So what is actually kept the US dollar and its value? It's the freedom, the heart, and the hard working of the people of America, nothing else.
Well, thank you, but but we're now thinking we're not so sure about our Constitution, our leaders, our government, our companies, our central bank. So, but our founding fathers say we need to have some type of revolution. Well, maybe, and some of them even said every generation. But I think universally, we're at a point.
Exactly. You see, tomorrow it's its first day of the walkout from work because of that mandate on a vaccine. And if you see, the only nation who stood up against this international tyrannical rule in a very nice manner is Americans. So if America falls, world falls. And this is this. And we know that. Everybody knows.
I agree.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other people who might like to talk? Last words, thoughts, ideas? Ooh,
I would say something if nobody else is.
good, go
I
ahead.
don't even know where I am, but let me.
There you are.
I guess I want to bring, maybe this was said and I wasn't paying attention already, but to just bring this man back into our presence. Maybe a man I felt like sometimes I had a little bit of love-hate relationship with, but you know, my trajectory to monetary work began long before encountering Steven Zarlenga, but encountering him and every conference. And as I said before, I had Steven Walsh to thank me for getting me at the first one. But yeah, I just really thank Steven Zarlenga for his work, for his contribution. I really think we have to up the pace. We started the Alliance for Just Money because that kind of mobilization wasn't going on, and AMI wasn't willing to change from the inside to allow us to be one and do it. And now we maybe have the best of both worlds because we're two in partnership, the offspring with the parent. And, you know, we might need another offspring or else to change ourselves to a 501c4, but maybe we need another offspring to be that. But we, as Sam said earlier, you know, the clock is ticking. And I think Greg articulated that really well. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do, but Steven Zarlenga put us really strongly on this path, on the shoulders of Del Mar and lots of other people. And let's keep going and probably get back to our significant others right now.
There's two hands up and I'm going to go to them right away. I just wanted to add for myself, for everyone who comes Saturday, I'm going to be very sneaky because I'm going to keep wanting to invite you back and you guys are going to be the stewards running AMI. So anyhow, we're working. I think Don and then Luciano. Don, want to?
Things with my time here because with Positive Money New Zealand, we are sort of out on a limb in a remote time zone, but there has been a lot of talk about regaining our power. I assert that we already have power, that we are powerful, and as we combine, we become more powerful. So if we step into the natural power that we have, we can achieve a lot. For myself, I've stood for Parliament a couple of times on a platform of monetary reform. I've made petitions to our Parliament. I've spoke at select committees, and the message is getting out there. The conversation is becoming mainstream. So now is a great time to act because we have a crisis, and the best time to formulate change is during a crisis. So let's take the power that we have and use it, because it doesn't honor who we are if we're waiting for someone else to give us the power. Plus, I have my favorite beer. It's called 18th Amendment beer here in New Zealand. And we all know what the 18th Amendment was, don't we, gentlemen? That was one law that did not stand. There's another law we can crack as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Don. The 18th Amendment, I was thinking of, was it women's right to vote? No, it was prohibition. So it was introducing back. Okay. So Luciano, can you give us a word?
Hello. Yeah, it's simple. Now I put the books in another place. They were books that you will never read. That is marketing, because you are economists, sociologists, and anthropologists, and all these things, philosophers. But you know what? You need to go to the market with an idea. Yes, sounds like a market, no? And you don't want that. But it's always an expert conversation. I understand that we are in a very expert conference, many thanks. But if you think in the future, it's very important, very expertise letters to important people, but 99, 98, 95% of population doesn't have idea, no? Well, I don't know if I was lucky or unlucky, but I had to read 7, 8 books of marketing. And I think that it's important to put the idea in the mind of people, no? Sometimes the phrase, the words that you use is a little difficult. I like the letter governor, simple, but I would like that you, the expert that you are, thinking in simple words to express. If not, use young people with good knowledge, like Alphonse or whatever, to translate the message, no? Like Greta, if you don't like Greta, another one. Because if not, always finish in a very nice book in the library, no? And an expert go there, read it, no? And he's an expert. But society never changed, never. So please, if you can, translate it to something more simple for people. Because here in the South, people is suffering. I'm not an Argentinian living in Europe or USA. I'm in Latin America, and Argentina is the best country in Latin America. The rest is, so that's my petition or request to start a campaign. Start the campaign with the experts on the top, obviously. If not, I don't know where can we go if I, for example, that I'm not an expert, I read all the books that you or govern and all the people read, no? Read, okay? I'm going to have 8 years, but nothing is going to change. I'm going to have more knowledge. And we need to move, no? And sometimes young people have another times. Just I would like that not to take my time, obviously, but to think in the times of young people that don't have houses, don't have jobs, don't have nothing, no? And that's all, okay? Many thanks for everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Luciano, Luciano, we really empathize with you. We've been in contact for a while. I know you've put your neck out there, and you also have had some, connections that you developed, which is really great. And I like here just to make the statement, of in this movement, there are a lot of older, white, bearded guys who have, who are going through stages of finding out their privilege, their white, Western, European, American privilege, and the many layers that are involved in it. I was very touched also by Mary Sanderson's statement about, you know, what's going on in mining communities in Latin America, you know, where they're mining the stuff that goes into our phones, and that also then goes into, you know, things that they say are green. But meanwhile, a lot of suffering is being, you know, caused by that. And you know, there's one great, well, there are many people who have thought about, you know, that our circle of empathy just have to keep growing. And you know, if you get beyond humanity, you include, you know, other species. But not just on an abstract level, but on a, you know, on a hard level, on a felt level, and an existential level, that it, you know, becomes a part of your actions in life. That you become humble, that you, you know, don't take yourself for granted, that you try to peel away layers of, you know, things that indeed we take for granted and that are based on privileges that we were born into, or that we fell into, or married into, or on the other side, a lot of us also fell out of, you know, a lot of privileges and had to deal with those challenges. To find out, you know, there's more to life and to others, how they struggle. So that's, you know, I'm with you there. I hope we can help you out in your struggle for Argentina and in making connections, and to keep you safe and sane also. But I do appreciate your more, now I'm getting it too. Stop all recording. No, you're emotional. You know, this is a heavy thing that we're dealing with.
No, thanks. I'm really happy with the letter because it's an action. It's an action. And it's not a super expert action, but it's very punctual. Makes me happy. Makes me happy the actions. No, I for sure climate activists don't know everything about Earth, carbon, cycle carbons, but they are there. No, it's like when people talk about Greta, doesn't matter Greta or could be another. It's not the people, it's the million of people that are behind that people. It's like MMT. Don't discuss with them. Just put a position, put it on a speech, and they don't know how to answer, because that's happened to me at the university. They don't know what to say direct. So you are fine, not you or Mr. Steven, sorry. I heard that you are trying to explain them that they are wrong. Don't explain them that they are wrong. They are wrong. Just explain your position. If not, you are like the second one in marketing, watching the first one and say, hey, no. If you want to be the leader, act as a leader. I am the best. It doesn't matter if you are. People follow leaders. No? And that's a point. That's all. I'm sorry for my sometimes emotion, but I want to change for me everything now. And I know that this is a process. That's all. Okay.
Thank you, Luciano. All the best.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Muchísimas gracias.
We have other, Alfonso and Fernanda.
Yeah, Alfonso and Fernanda, followed by Dave.
The conversation has shifted so much before since I thought of my question. So I kind of just want to acknowledge the great reflections and the discussion about including the suffering of other people. And one comment that I had kind of left over from Virginia's presentation and like all of this discussion about farm work is that I'm curious if there has been conversations about including so I research the health of farm worker populations and their role in harvesting all of these fruits and vegetables that aren't machine harvested, and the bodily suffering that they endure from, being hunched over, picking berries, etc. And that form of economic, that cost on the human suffering in like this cog in that economic machine isn't calculated within like the price of the berries that you pick up at the grocery store. So I'm just curious about the ideas of parity, and if they're going to, if it's going to be possible to in some way add in those factors of health and human well-being, in addition to the concept of regenerating the soil that we know is the root of the economic system. That's one root, but it's also the human health is a crucial factor that needs to be considered when we're looking at setting prices for things. And also just the conversation on, I know we had some discussion in the chat about the vaccines and COVID, just thinking about the human health cost of all the lives lost with COVID, not to mention disability costs later on. I'm just shooting out ideas of things that haven't been accounted for within these concepts that I feel are really crucial to include, and I'd like to.
Fernanda, may I address it? Just there's a little part of it I'd like to address.
want a
So
little part too.
in our proposed legislation, in the NEED Act, took into account the original or the classic goals of central banks, full employment and a stable price. A growing GDP. We want to add to that, and that will cover a lot of things of quality of life, and that is just the idea of quality of life, that the indicator of progress is not a growing GDP, but that another metric, and there are so many out already there, that have to do with quality of life, with health, longevity, care for new mothers, you name it, and it can be included. So that is not necessarily totally thought out, but it is germinating that central banks need to be, well, for example, they already need to be more aware of where they put their money, from whom are they buying, debt. Rather not anymore from fossil fuel companies, because they might go under anyway. Their stock might at a certain moment become quite low. So that's the thing I want to say, that is kind of germinating within the monetary reform movement, to include quality of life metrics. I'll leave it at that.
I'd like to respond. I'm old enough, one of my favorite Americans and whose biography I read was Cesar Chavez. And when he was active with the farm labor movement, I certainly never bought lettuce or whatever was to be on strike at any given time. And it's a huge point. And if they figured out parity in the 30s, and I don't know what the migration population was picking berries at that time, but what wasn't ever covered, maybe, and certainly not enough caring probably pay for women or a good part of that economy, maybe not enough pay for the farmers themselves. But all of that migrant labor, if that's not in parity at a very, very good price, the idea behind the NEED Act, from where I'm coming from, is the idea that everyone should get good employment, good wages, good benefits, and And if there is automatically the money to create it. If we take back the seniorage and the control of the creation of the money, you can create the money for all of that. And it's not inflationary. It doesn't hurt the economy because those people are working for society. They're doing good work for society, and it's not inflationary. You can find the balance there. It's only when you create money for no purpose that it's inflationary. So if our priority is the health, the quality of, as Virginia brought up too, the quality of health index, happiness index, that's what we should be going for, not necessarily towards a greater GDP. Some of those are my ideas, but that's basically how I look at the NEED Act. And I look at the possible benefits from it. And it's the idea of good employment there.
Sue here.
Dave has his hand and then Sue.
Okay.
Dave Helm, please go ahead. I'm going to try to unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can, Dave.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wonderful conference. Thank you. It's been years since I've attended one. A couple things I wanted to throw out here, and I feel for Luciano there. I'm a spoiled northerner living in Cleveland, Ohio, and have known Greg for a long time. I have horrible news, just horrible. I mean, please, somebody correct me, counteract me. And I put it out there. I want you to see the two websites. One's called arctic-news.blogspot.com. And there's another one called guymcpherson.com. Please take a look at those and judge for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Just get into those websites. These people think that we maybe have 2 to 4 years left. And I'll give you the 4 major reasons why very quickly. And I know that sounds outrageous and most of you are just saying that's ridiculous, but hear me through if you could. The 4 things you really want, and these people are not the greatest at communicating this, but here, if you summarize it, here's what it boils down to. Number 1, a blue ocean event in the summer months on the Arctic Ocean. What we're talking about, the Arctic Ocean has always been frozen in the summer months before. And over the last 12 years, it's mostly slush. So this ocean for 6 months of the year that was white and a reflector becomes a blue absorber of heat. Now think of it, this is a whole ocean up there. And we know that the Arctic is warming 3 times faster than the rest of the globe. So the good news is that we did not have a blue Arctic event this summer. So there's a little piece of good news. Others say it's almost certain to happen next summer. And if it does happen, then you have like 1 year left after that. So that's one item. The second one was mentioned a little earlier about the North Atlantic Circulator, the AMOC system, which is the Gulf Stream and much of the world's oceans. The weather is determined by that. My jaw about hit the floor when about 2 months ago in the Washington Post, there was a big article that this could reverse or stop at any time, that just nobody knows at this point, but it is warming to the point where it could reverse. And you start to get, and it was the theme of the movie The Day After Tomorrow, if you remember that from about 10 years ago. So that's the second thing. Essentially the Gulf Stream, if it stops going north and then reverses or just stops or whatever, you get horrendous cooling events here in the north. The third thing is a polar vortex hitting the grain growing season at planting season. Now here in Cleveland and the northern cities, 2 years ago in Chicago, they had minus 50 degrees for 3 days. In Minnesota, it was minus 65 degrees for 3 days. Now, if that hits us here in Cleveland, we're miserable, but we'll survive it. But what's scary and doesn't get nearly the attention, if a polar vortex hits the grain growing regions here in the Midwest, at planting season, when the plants are very vulnerable, that you could have mass starvation. So that's the third thing to worry about, a polar vortex hitting the grain growing regions at planting season. The fourth one, and this is one that nobody knows, but you could have a 45 gigaton methane belch from the East Siberian Arctic shelf at any moment. There is not one person on this planet that can tell you that that will or will not happen. But researchers up there, this one lady at the University of Fairbanks, thinks it could happen. So to summarize, there's a huge amount of frozen ice. It's called fire ice. It's ice that burns because it has so much methane in it. This fire ice, the vast majority of it around the world is very, very deep, very, very cold, very high pressure. Don't worry about it. However, it turns out that we have a lot of fire ice at 200-foot depth up in the Arctic, and that could release in a giant 1 to 2 month long methane belch at any time. If that happens, any one of these four, if they happen, there's secondary effects that start kicking in that do us in. So I wish I had better. I throw this out to you. I throw this out to you because you're thoughtful, wonderful, decent people, and I've admired your work for years. I hope I'm wrong. Oh, do I hope I'm wrong? And Guy McPherson and these other researchers, I hope they're wrong. But do take a look at the websites. Judge for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Judge for yourself. Thank you
for putting them in there. I didn't see them when I glanced, but I'll get them all later and it'll be a part of the record. So they'll be out there, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wish I had better news.
My question to you was, I hope you're not selling survival equipment.
No, I'm not selling
But
anything.
You would recommend people to be prepared.
No, don't. I mean, these billionaires that have their survival homes in New Zealand, Guy McPherson deals with that very succinctly. I mean, they have no idea what they're dealing with here. Believe me, none of these. And by the way, the billionaires. So what you really want to focus on are called geoengineering. And I've just run across one just a day or two ago that is just fantastic. But the only thing that's going to save us, if you believe this argument, the only thing that's going to save us is geoengineering efforts, most likely done by the billionaires, because it'll never get through with the Republican Party the way it is. There's no way it's ever going to happen at a governmental level. But Elon Musk is probably the only hope. He's put up $100 million for the carbon capture prize and whatnot. But those are probably the only people that are going to save us at this point. But what makes this different from, say, the hole in the ozone that we had a number of years ago is that once this people will not mobilize until there is a catastrophic event, a horrible, just unimaginable event. And when that happens on this particular issue, it's too late because there's so many secondary effects that kick in. That's the horror of it. Unlike the hole in the ozone, which got bad enough that we finally dealt with it, this one, we won't deal with it until there's just a horrific, unimaginable event. And when that happens, guess what? You're about 5 to 10 years too late. So I hope I'm wrong. Oh, do I hope I'm wrong? And I'm not selling anything. I just want to be alive like you folks.
Yeah.
Thank you again for
We've got our
listening.
work to do to work together, and thank you for sharing too, Dave.
Okay, well, thank you for listening.
Okay. Oh, Sue.
Yes. First, I want to thank Steve and Govert for organizing a wonderful conference where everyone could express their voices. It was really helpful. I found a lot of people that I wanted to follow up with, that impressed me, that I, were attracted to, and I learned a lot from them. So that's one of my thoughts. This is my other thought, and it goes to, I haven't been here for the whole thing, but it goes to what I've learned from my writing this year. I I'm doing a series of articles. I've done 5. I'm working on the 6th, and it's called the Money Matrix series. And it's basically looking at how we got here by looking at the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and what was going on back in 1900 and how they slowly, gradually, they do it gradually, you know, have shaped our world today. So what I learn is this, and I especially learned this because 3 of the articles about how they shaped our education system. You know, the division of left versus right, Democratic versus Republican, is so shaped by these money powers and has been over the course of many generations. And I came to this realization really strongly because I was studying, you know, the history of the funding by the foundations, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and more of them, of our educational system, starting in 1910, when the tax-exempt foundations were created. And I came across this educational reformer who's in her 90s now. She lives in Spain, but she was living in Maine. She had a couple of kids in school. She was involved in her school board and everything. And for some reason, she never quite understood. She was invited in to Reagan's first term in 1980 to be the liaison between the White House and the Department of Education. And she said, you know, I was totally surprised because my role would usually be held by an academic at Harvard or something. But anyway, she went in there and she discovered what was going on. And she said this thing that sticks with me to this day. She said, you know, I'm a conservative. I went in there, you know, believing Ronald Reagan. And she said, listen, there are neo-conservatives. Those are the ones that's speaking out through the mass media. They're not real conservatives. And that really made me think how much of the words of the left and the right are put before us to keep us from joining together and thinking together and focusing on who's really controlling the reality we all see. So I just want to say that in terms of monetary reform, don't get sidetracked by the left or right issues because it's presented to us by the money power, the rich controllers of the creation of money and who to give it to. And they've done it many, many generations. They're really good at it. It's more important to find that history and find each other. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Sue. I'm glad history speaks to you. And you've influenced a lot of people with it. So thank you very much. It's great stuff. I like history for the same reasons, and it's good. Who else hasn't spoken? Oh,
Hey, I've got a
Howard,
thing.
Howard,
Okay.
Howard.
I know. Just before Lucille leaves, I think we have to give our thanks to everybody behind the scenes doing the spotlighting and the vetting, and we had a whole list of items that we did, and Lucille was part of that. Alfonso, of course, was part of that. I have to see my list because there were so many part of it.
Sue was a part of it.
Ryan was part of that.
Tabitha helped at different times.
Mary
with the
Sanderson,
party.
Sue, Jerry, they all did roles behind the scenes that most of you were not aware of, and I thank them very much. Without them, it would not have been as smooth as it would be. If it was just only Steven and I, it would have been maybe a royal F up.
And Ryan's there too. Thank you, Ryan, too. Ryan spotlighted this after today.
Yeah, so many thanks, guys, and of course keep in touch with Steven to whatever other adventures he wants to set up for AMI to help him out.
Yes, I'm a poor child. Help this old man. I'd go in the playgrounds in the third grades and I'd pretend I'm an old man. Help this old man. And then during Halloween, I would turn into something scary out in the playground and all the little kids loved it. So anyhow, I always enjoyed being a teacher, and I'd be around kids in the playground or letting them in the morning, and they would give me energy. So Howard, you're going to grace us with a song, Sir Howard.
Well, I'm not sure grace is the right word, but anyway.
It is. It is.
I want to thank Dave for bringing up the crisis that we're facing, the convergence of multiple crises, really. And it's really the impetus of why I'm here at Monetary Reform and why I am also a part of political action going forward to change the system. And I'm going to try something with my song. I'm going to try to put some music behind it, and I want to see if you can hear this okay. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Okay. I've been thinking about the money, it's been shaking my mind. Barely make a living while I'm living in my primes. Selling out my life of working for a lousy dime. No matter how hard I'm working all the time. When the week is finally done, I get my paycheck a fine. While there may be lots of money, very little of it's mine. So I got me a ride down to the payday loan, hoping I could get enough for a place of my own. My mind was dazed by all the money I could get, but now I got nothing and I'm deeper in debt. Now, who wants a money like that? Yeah. Who wants a money like that? Yeah, the system is disgusting. That's why I'm out here busking. The rich are getting richer and the infrastructure's rusting. I'm working 3 jobs and still the debt is crushing. The homeless population learning not to be so trusting, cause the system don't care or listen to our fussing. The Congress only money talks and you can hear it cussing. The banks control the money for the profits of a few, and they make a lot of money, but none of it's for you. It's all about the power and it's all about control. They're gonna use the money to enslave your soul. Now who wants a money like that? Yeah. Who wants a money like that? Ah, but money shouldn't be some money-making deal. It's time to change the money, time to make the money real. You know how injustice and corruption makes you feel, like the world is against you and you got no way to deal with the awful aggravation watching greedy bankers steal. Now we can do it better, the solution's been found. History shows us how we can make the money sound. Create a public money that can pay it all down. An asset that is always circulating around. Make a better world with our feet all on the ground. Now who wants a money like that?
Yeah.
I want a money like that. I want a money like that.
Oh.
That look. That.
More.
Oh, that's all I got.
Thanks, Kate.
All right. Yeah. Well, I hope you could hear it okay.
Yes.
All right.
Great,
Well,
Howard.
it was definitely an excellent conference this year. I have to say I was very impressed throughout the whole thing. I was planning on skipping a bunch of it, but I couldn't do it. All right. Well, thank you very much for all of your help and work and everything for this event.
So Howard, for those who aren't Alliance members who are here, why the hell should anyone join the Alliance?
Well, if you think the end of the world is about to come, we got to do something about it. And of course, it's going to take political change. And but understanding what power is something that people don't know about. And so money is power. They need to understand the money to understand the power so we can take back the power. Otherwise, you don't, if you don't know where the power is, you can't hardly take it. So that's my kind of thinking on that. And of course, a lot needs to happen. All of these movements of for climate, that's an impetus for monetary reform. Racial justice, that's an impetus for monetary reform. Getting, you know, because oppression is funded from the very top, and it just all tumbles down to the people. And you know, it doesn't matter what kind of issue comes up, they know how to exploit it. Join us if yeah, please join the Alliance to see if we can't make a big change in the power relations. You know, we may need to convince the elite somehow that they need to change because things are going to get really bad and there's nothing they can do about it. They think, you know, Bill Gates thinks he can figure things out, thinks he, you know, rich people get these funny ideas about, you know, how smart they are. But but it's actually an inverse relationship. I think, you know, the more money you get, the more affected you are by the effects of usury, the psychological effects of usury. And so it really impacts their psychological capabilities of really doing anything smart in terms of for everybody. To me, it's not smart to do things that aren't for everybody. And so I guess that's it. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful year.
Yeah.
You're unmuted.
Yes, I would just want to give a quick
Steven
thanks
has the power
to no, I just wanted to say thank you to Mary Sanderson in particular. And I think she just left. I saw her waving her hand, but I wanted to acknowledge her work too this weekend. But anyhow, we might have just missed her. I can call her and talk and tell her that too. So we can all send our own positive energy for her and for all of us too. I don't have a whole lot more. I can just give you a little update. We've cataloged. I came back a year ago with 93 boxes in a truck and 33 boxes of Steven's books and 66 boxes of his papers and a few boxes of Bob Petit's papers. And oh, yeah,
no, I'm doing.
And Hobart is showing you the AMI library over here and the file cabinets on your left. This is my living room. I have file cabinets for partners in my living room. And so this is the work we've been cataloging. We have we had 2 scanners going. So we scanned about 2,000 files this summer. And oh yeah. And this right now you're seeing Hobart's little library that he's just added this weekend. And so it's 2 bedrooms. And if AMI is always open, if you need to do some monetary research, I think we're the number one. I gave away all my education books, all my environmental books, and I think we now have the number 1 monetary library if anybody's wants to do research. So, so that was,
Tell everybody where you are so they know where to find you. They might not know.
well, you have my information. I'm in Evanston, Illinois, just outside Chicago, and it's a nice apartment complex. It's the architecture is like a beehive, and there's a lot of different people living here, from young to old, and it's small but efficient, and
It's a nice cozy place.
yeah, it's open though too. It has a real open feeling. There's bedrooms, but there's it feels like a tent otherwise.
And it's next to Northwestern University. Actually, Northwestern is just at the other side of the street. And then in the evening, Stephen and I walk around there like 2 old professors, mumbling in strange language, going to Whole Foods, getting good stuff, going to the beach, for which it's still time to get a little walk in. But yeah, I think this library is pretty amazing altogether. You know, I found all kinds of books, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to read this, I want to read that. And I haven't even dug into Zerlanga's files yet. I did get to read some of the things that he had not published, and those were fascinating. But yeah, I'll be back here also to help him organize his library further.
Before he leaves.
Because it's hard to find some of the books because they're not alphabetical, they're not, you know, categorized.
Well, they were a little bit, but anyhow. So that's just a little update on AMI. But last year's conference was done in a pinch. And this year's conference, we ran into technology, and we should do a shout out to Drazen and Darko Dodig out of Toronto from Croatia. And they've been helping tremendously update the website. And over the next few months, that'll be updated. We'll launch a new AMI website, and we'll have more time to plan and think and do things. So I hope we do little, you know, work it out with AFJM. I just saw that Bo Young said they're planning a Bridges coffee shop. I'm not sure what that'll be, but we'll figure out what's not being done, and we'll complement each other to cover more territory together. So we, AMI and AFJM should be strong together.
And IMMR, of course, let's not forget.
Oh, yeah,
IMMR.
yes. And Mary Lou at IMR, from IMMR, has been communicating with us even today too. So we have our friends out there, and we're part of a bigger movement. And thanks go to IMMR too for participating in this work, and they in advertising, and for AFJM for the advertising, getting the word out. And I was really nice this morning. We had Professor Yamaguchi here from
Japan.
Yeah, from Japan, who's now living in Turkey, and doing wonderful work. But he gave a wonderful paper last year, but he's been very important. If we were rich, we could hire him and we could model parity. And I wouldn't care if we called it parity or just parity or parity for all, whatever the term would be, I'd be happy. But anyhow, farmers all around the world, one of the biggest things, Dave Helm just mentioned the climate, but one of the biggest issues in terms of mobilization took place a few months ago or during this last year was the farmers of India and the struggles they're going through. And I'm going to call it a psychological whiplash of what the farmers in America over the last 70 years have been suffering, drip by drip, slowly by slowly. 900 farm families have been lost every week for the last 70 years. 900 farms per week through over its 3 million farms have shut down in the last 70 years in the United States. But it took 70 years. What they're planning to, with some of that movement and cause and effect is happening now in Europe, and there's a big push in India for that to happen. And you know, can you imagine having 200 million people out in the streets? It's like 2/3 of the population of the United States, practically, or almost. So anyhow, I'm going to be quiet.
Well, Steven, you want to
Should we close?
hit the gavel? You got a gavel somewhere? The book.
I'm going to hit the book.
Oh, hold on. Of course, Joe Polito, last words.
Oh,
before
Joe,
the gavel.
here we go.
Just a wonderful job, gentlemen. You did a remarkable job. Okay, it really did. And you know, I just don't know how you do it. A little thought about the library. Wouldn't it be great if Stephen had written something on central bank digital currency? But I think that's probably after his, you know, became a thing after he passed, unfortunately.
Yeah, in his last year, it was a bit slow for him.
Yeah.
You know, that would have been the last time he. Yeah, actually, it was after his death. The idea was initiated by Michael Kumhoff, and I happen to know the date. It was November 27th, 2017 in Frankfurt. And he went to that conference, and that's when he proposed. And what he called CBDC at that time was called side-by-side competition. And he wasn't sure if people or a bank would take on CBDCs. So he said, if you get CBDCs, you get a 2% bonus or something for a while. And so that was the beginning. And Joseph Huber was there at the conference. And he says, oh my gosh, Kumhoff's gone to the other side. you know, he felt it was very negative right away. But, you know, over time, Huber began to change some and look at it as a possible halfway measure. And I think where I've ended up, I don't think I've changed much during this conference on CBDCs. It's going to be the devil is in the details.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be us checking it out constantly and being suspicious. And I think, you know, we have good experts here or good people on it. You know, Leanne, John Titus, and others of us. You know, I don't know where, like, say, Peshwak's going to put his energies in this, but we have talent all around us that can look into this.
Stephen,
And
what was
other-
that Frankfurt conference you referred to?
It was a yeah, it was a conference in Frankfurt, and I'm forgetting it. One of us went there. It was Michael White who went to that conference.
What year again?
2017,
Okay, thanks.
November 27. And I'm forgetting the name.
Still go to the AFGM bibliography. There is, you know, if you just search for conference, there are different conferences popping up, but they did 2 of them in a row. And it was kind of mixed between, you know, hoity-toity economists and some monetary reformers and other kind of reformers. But there is some references and links in the bibliography of the Alliance.
Were there central bankers there?
I think so too, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was,
Steve, I've got some recordings of that conference. It's Howard Marks here.
oh, Howard, yes. When
I have-
Michael White came back from there, he stayed at Howard's house and Howard downloaded. Oh, actually, I downloaded some too.
You have
thanks
them
to
too,
Howard.
man. You have them too. I think so.
There's only so much time in the day. So,
Yeah.
okay, do we gavel this meeting to official close? I just want to thank you all and I thank the spirit of Zarlanga and all of you have a great November and until we meet next.
All right, gavel.
Okay, I'm getting the word to gavel. Okay. If this video was helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe for new video notifications. Please consider donating at monetary.org/donate. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter at AMI Monetary or on our website